Hi, welcome or welcome back. My name is Yu Wing. You can call me Yu Win or Win, and I'm really happy to share this time and space with you right now. So, I like to start each one of my videos with a practice just to share for your consideration. And so, the practice that I wanted to share with you is having a gratitude accountability partner. And so this was actually something that came out of a conversation I was having with my brother quite a while ago. I can't actually remember how long ago it's been, but I just noticed that he seemed really stressed and he seemed kind of grumpy, which, he could be when he was stressed. And so I had suggested that we share three gratitudes that we had for the day, three things that we were grateful for, even if it was the same thing three times. And we got into a habit of sending each other those three items every day. And so we did that for a while, and he actually was in different places in the world. And it was something that I think was really impactful for him. And it was helpful for me to just always make sure that I practiced gratitude within the day. Now I spend time writing down the things that I'm grateful for in my journal, but sometimes with friends, just to kind of check in, I like to ask what they're grateful for. So if any of those resonate with you, feel free to take it with you. If not, feel free to leave it here. Thanks. So today, I wanted to talk about why I think my twin is my twin, and then sometimes why I think he's not my twin. So allow me to indulge and share a little bit because I've been thinking about him. We have been in touch um, a little bit each day. He's traveling right now, and there was a night where I was really scared, was feeling very fearful of some of the news that I'd heard about in the country. And sometimes when I get into that space, what helps me to hold on is to share what I'm grateful for people, especially if something were to happen and I wouldn't have the chance to say those things. And so, there were a couple of people that I had reached out to, a couple of people I was sharing these gratitudes with, and one was my twin. So that's why I've been thinking about him a little bit more than before his trip. And so, some of the reasons why, I'm going to start with my doubts. So, they say that twin souls or twin flames have the same or a very similar like energetic signature, right? So um like having certain behaviors or like the energy like that you sort of exude is similar to your twin. And so sometimes I'm just like, are we similar? Because then there's the idea of being like um the manifestation of like the other part of you, right? So if I identify as being a divine feminine, then they are the manifestation of my divine masculine or vice versa, right? And not connected to gender, but just the energy, right? And so I'm like, are we similar? Because in a lot of ways, like I, I sort of just see the stark differences, right? Which can make sense too, right? Um, if you believe that these pieces balance each other out, right? Where I'm very considerate and gentle, I think, with my general interactions with people. He can be, I don't even know the word, brass, maybe. He could be loud. He can be uncomfortably, not sharp, not in general. I mean, he can be sharp, but right. So some of these differences, right? So, it's one of the like main doubts that I have about like really my twin. So then some of the reasons why I feel like or I believe that he's my twin is there is a shared consciousness. So as as a sensitive person, possibly an empath, possibly a highly sensitive person, depending on how you define it, as someone who has fawned in order to feel like I'm safer, I can pick up on other people's energy. I can have trouble sleeping the night before a natural disaster. I have had a really hard time sleeping before my ex's mom passed away. Right. And so something was sort of energetically off, but I can't identify who it's coming from unless someone's like talking to me for some reason and saying, like, oh, something's going on and like some body part of mine hurts. And, you know, like, oh, interesting. That hasn't happened very much with other people. Right. But in general, you can sort of feel energy when I walk into a room or, like before the earthquake in 2011 in Japan, there was an earthquake in Samoa before that. And so the night before that, I had a really hard time sleeping. And then I had a hard time sleeping for the Japan earthquake and tsunami. And so with my twin, at least in the maybe in the first like couple of years, we discovered that I could sense and feel his negative states. So the first time it happened, um, it was like a Saturday morning. It was like 10 o'clock, and I started to feel sad. And usually, when I feel sad, there's a catalyst, right? So, if I have an argument with someone, if I've read about something in the news, right, it can make me feel sad. None of that happened on that particular day. And so, probably in the afternoon, I may have been saying hello, messaging my twin. And my twin was like, how are you doing? And I was like, oh, I don't know what the catalyst was, but it kind of came out of the blue. But, I was feeling sad this morning. And then he was like, what time did you start feeling sad? This is through text. So not with tone, but this is how I interpreted it. And I was like, oh, like around like 10. And he was like, I started feeling sad at 9 a.m. And I was like, oh. And so I was like, oh, that's very interesting. And then we had sort of this like turning point in our ship, and um, we were both really scared that we were going to like no longer be in each other's lives, and we sort of spent the day not talking to each other, right? And this is after that sad event. And so when we talked about it later that night, he was like, I wonder how much of it was mine that I was feeling, like my sadness about what happened in our conversation, And I wonder how much of yours I was feeling. And I was like, oh, that's a good point. Because if it felt like we were going through a breakup, even though we were never together. Um, and that, it's just like we're just platonic friends, like, mm. And so that was a really interesting experience, right? So for me, shared consciousness is experiencing what he experiences, even if it's not something that I'm directly going through, right? Um, I think there was also another time um, after, he had lost, he was like going through a period of like mourning or grieving. And I was like asking him about how his heart was feeling, like energetically and emotionally. And I was like, yeah, it kind of feels like congested, or like, um, and I think I got this from Rachel Kaplan, a therapist in the Bay Area, but this idea of like emotional constipation, I was like, oh yeah, in my mind, that makes sense. Like, can we get to a point where we just allow the emotions to move out of our body instead of like holding it in and feeling constipated, right? So I was like explaining this to him. And then I was like, yeah, I'm kind of feeling that like you're like emotionally or your heart is constipated. And he's like, oh, I'm constipated too. I was like, huh? And then I was like, wait, now that I think about it, sorry, TMI, but um, it was it was really interesting. And I think it got really difficult for me with this aspect because he got into, such a dark place. And I think we were not as communicative. And so I would often feel like my heart hurt or that there's like a general sadness that I could not find the catalyst for in my own life. And I just wondered if it was coming from him or if I was like feeling somebody else's. And so it was learning how to navigate and like put energetic boundaries for myself. And then I was also wondering, like, how come? Well, like 95% of the time, what I empath is the negative, right? So I was like, how come I don't empath like the good or the positive? And so then I paused and said, 90 or 95% because there was one time it was his birthday and it was like the first birthday that I got to like share with him and, or not share with him because we were separated by distance, but that I knew him enough to know that it was his birthday. And so we were talking, and then he was telling me that there was like a surprise birthday thing that like all of his humans in his community like um showed up for. And I think we might have like messaged each other afterwards. And I was just like, oh, how are you feeling? And he was like, oh, I feel really loved. And then like in that moment as he said that, I started to feel like there was like love overflowing from my heart. And then it started to sort of like go throughout my entire body. So then, before I knew it, I just felt like I was like pulsating, right? Like my skin was sort of vibrating. And like there was like sort of like kinetic energy in my body, even though I wasn't like moving my body. And it just felt like all of this love was emanating from me. And I had never experienced any of those kinds of sensations other than maybe, no, had never experienced a sensation or experience like that, right? And as he continued to talk and share about, just like how wonderful it was to see people that he hadn't seen in a while, and it just continued to sort of grow to the point where it felt like it was beyond my body. And um, I don't know if I was mirroring what he was feeling, if I was like connecting and tapping into what he was feeling, and it sort of like took over me as well. Um, I may have asked him like how he was feeling in his body. I can't recall all of the details, but I was just like, maybe that was the closest thing to like having like empathing one of his positive experiences, but very rarely does that happen. So that's one thing in terms of why I feel like he's my twin, that we share this consciousness. I think the other piece is, so there's somebody after, I met somebody after him where I felt like there was soul recognition. Like from the very first encounter, I felt like I showed up and I shared my soul and or my essence. And they showed up and they shared their soul with me. And so the exchange was very open, even though this is the first time we're meeting, right? And so even though I feel like a soul connection with this person, I have never felt their presence with me the way that I feel the presence of my twin sometimes. Um, and sometimes I have to be like very like centered and I have to be like in a really good space to be able to experience that. But aside from my twin, even with somebody that um, is willing to meet with me, like heart to heart and soul to soul, I don't feel their presence the way I feel my twins. And so um, we did an experiment before where we had learned that we both practice Reiki, and um, it was my birthday. It was like the first birthday that we were in each other's lives. And he could be like, oh, hey, happy birthday. So he was like, in the next 20 minutes, just see what you notice. Uh, I'll, I'll, touch back with you. So I was like, okay. I'm like, oh. So I sort of just like meditated. I got into like, I think I laid down. I laid down and I was just like, okay, let's just see what I feel. And my skin felt like it started tingling. Was it tingling? Um, yeah, let's call it tingling. Like it felt like something was bubbling underneath the surface of my skin. So I was like, oh, and I never really felt that way. Um, And then I remembered that I had the sensation of somebody sort of like stroking my hair, but I think I remember like the right side of my temple was tingling like very strongly. So then after 20 minutes, we checked in and I was like, oh, this is what I was experiencing. And I was like, how come? And then he was like, oh, I was sending you Reiki. Um, and he called it like I was sending you a Reiki hug. Like even though I can't hug you because we're at a distance, I was sending you a hug and I was infusing it with Reiki. And I was like, oh, okay. So because I don't remember like the sensations in my legs, I do remember it specifically, like in my arms and then like the side of my head. Um, so that was an example of how I felt his presence even though we've been separated. I will say that I can only feel his presence from a distance if his heart is open. Like if he's like in a if he has the capacity to like, because a lot of times he closes his heart when he's overwhelmed or going through a lot or um, grieving. I think he tends to like close his heart. So um, so I felt his presence at a distance. Um, and there were like a few times like when he would like send me Reiki and I would like have very uh, singular experiences of like, oh, I've never experienced this before. Um, and then one of the things I think is really hard to explain. So I'm gonna share the background that will help me maybe make this point. The last thing I want to share is that they say, some people say, and I believe this from my past life regression therapy, um, that we have lived multiple lifetimes knowing each other in whatever form we were in, right? So I've spoken about how my soul is like my essence or my true self, and that stays constant throughout lifetimes or universes or, however if you believe in this, right? And then each lifetime is specific. So in this lifetime, I happen to be a Vietnamese American woman. Um, there may have been a lifetime where I was a man living in Egypt, a man living in the United States in the 1800s. It's ending up somewhere in the Midwest, right? So each lifetime is a little bit different. But there have been lifetimes, and not all of them, but some of them, where my soul has been in contact with his soul, right? There have also been plenty of lifetimes where our souls did not know each other in the physical form, or if we were even, like around at the same time. And so that's kind of the background. So the aspect that makes me feel like he's my twin is that there's sort of two parts of this. The first part is when I interact with him, I simultaneously hold the different roles that we may have experienced throughout our lifetimes, right? So if we had a role where we were close friends, I feel that role. Um, there is a role, if there was a lifetime where I was his caregiver or he was my caregiver, I experienced that. If I was his child, if I was his sibling, if I was his teacher, if I was his student or disciple. So somehow I simultaneously experience all of those roles at the same time when I'm interacting with him, right? Um, so it's hard for me to like say that he's my friend because I feel like there's a familial, like a family bond. I feel like there's a teacher bond. I feel like there's a student bond, right? It's like all happening at the same time. So it's hard for me to define him. And so it makes it so much easier when I refer to him as my twin because then I don't have to explain all these things. And then the second aspect of this for me, and I don't know if it's just a separate one or just connected, but when he tells me a story of something that happened to him in his past, as he's sharing the story, I feel like I am there in time and space with him, even though I was not, right? Because we have always lived at a distance and we met because I had traveled closer to where he lived. And when he shares the story, so for example, something from his childhood, let's say going to the park, right, with family and friends, when he's telling me the story, I transport to the park and I imagine watching him run around, in the playground until the lights come down and it's time to go home, right? Or, if he shared a story of his father driving him somewhere and sort of like the conversation that they had, I'm watching him and his dad have that conversation in the car, but I'm not physically in the car. right? So I just get transported to wherever it is that he like describes. And I'm like, it's not even something that I think I try to do intentionally, but as he's sharing, it's sort of like it happens. And what I'm experiencing isn't usually or always visual. I'm not very visual, right? When I do past life regression therapy, I feel it in my body. I don't see it like a movie. I just feel like, okay, I'm, traveling and everyone in my family has passed away. I feel that I'm wearing overalls. I feel like I'm wearing overalls, but I don't see it like, oh, I see a man like wearing overalls, or even like if I was physically there, I don't see myself wearing overalls. So that's another reason why I feel like he's my twin. But yeah, that's probably like the main things. So I'm just curious if there are any aspects that you experience if you are on a twin soul journey, if there are experiences that you've had or a way that you've been connected or the ways that you're similar. I'd love to hear if you would like to share in the comments. Thank you for letting me share about my twin. And I mean, there is no scientific proof. And I think that's always been the thing about the spiritual or the ephemeral, the ethereal, the religious, right? And for me, it doesn't mean that it can't be true or someone can't believe it. So there's a lot that we can't see that I believe is there. So thanks for letting me share and speak my truth. And I hope that it supports you in feeling like you can be you. And I do hope that you know, or that you will soon come to believe, that who you are, exactly as you are, is worthy and deserving of unconditional love. I look forward to connecting with you next time. And until then, please take good care. Okay, bye bye.